All right, guys. So thank you very much for taking CMP 103. Now, as we get started in this course, I want to make sure that you understand what's happening in these videos. So stick with me for just a minute before we get to the topic. These videos will be there for 7 days. They will not return. So you have 7 days to actually finish it. And if you don't, then you miss it. And they don't reopen. They'll never reopen. This is part of your attendance. If you didn't do the videos, the chances are you're going to be absent. Really, for me, what do these videos do? Well, there's things that the book doesn't talk about that I think are really important that you need to know. Make sure that you actually do the videos, take the time to do them. And if you're looking for extra credit, if you're one of those people that does, man, I have some people that do a fantastic job when they answer these questions. And I give extra credit points when I see that. So we're going to take a look at the beginnings of the PC and really where we're at right now. Now, that's an important thing to understand. Most of you learned at least a little bit about the Industrial Revolution as you went to school. I don't mean college. And so the second Industrial Revolution, that really, it's very liberal in the way they define this, but it started around 1860 and it peaked around 1940. And that's almost 100 years. So if we take that scenario and we say, well, the first applicable use of an electronic computer. So if you really go back into time, they start calling all sorts of things computers because the term computer means to just compute, to just do a calculation, right? And you can do that with stones and set them on the ground. All right. So the first electronic computer, which is what we have. So the grandfather of what we have, or great-great-grandfather, was in 1944. So if we take the Industrial Revolution as a scale and say, how long did that take that to peak? Then somewhere around 2044, and we're getting close to that, the impact of the technology will reach its peak, meaning that computer technology will not advance any further as far as being involved in society. Its peak is there. Now, I think that is not true. Let me fix my its here. I think that we actually have to take a look at the first and second industrial revolutions, and that adds a whole nother 100 years to the scenario. And if we do that, then you're looking at the impact not peaking until 2144. Holy cow, 2144. That means we're kind of in the middle of this. We're not at the end of it. We're in the middle. Now, how does that fit in with anything? Well, if you really look at the journals of people that lived during the turn of the century from the 1800s to the 1900s, so much was happening at their time that you just could not believe everything. I mean, it's just like, wow, right? People were starting to fly. More importantly, they steamed across oceans in weeks instead of months. Those same steam engines were applied to trains, and it took them across a continent in days instead of weeks, right? It's fantastic. It's just a fantastic time to live in if you're living in the turn of the century from the 18th to the 1900s. And that's kind of the thing. The truth is right, we're the same way. We kind of look at it and go, wow, look at all this cool stuff. Nothing could ever be better. Right? Nothing could ever become more than what we're already seeing now, or it's so cool. How much further will this go? That kind of attitude. And we don't really understand the impact of things. So I am going to show you how this happened here, making things more powerful and shrinking it down. And I'm going to explain how basically you are talking about specific technology advancements and how that has affected everything and continues to affect everything. So the vacuum tube and the transistor do the exact same thing. They represent a 1 or a 0. Now the truth is that is a little oversimplification of the matter, but it's good enough for us at this point. Now this is what's called a silicone wafer. And this wafer, if you can see, has a lot of tiny little squares on it. Well, those little squares are the actual processor that we put in to the computer. So way back into the 40s and 50s, we were using these vacuum tubes. And so obviously you couldn't put millions of these vacuum tubes into a system that you'd have to use too much power for that, and it would be massive and huge. Then it got shrunk down to the transistors, which we used throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And these are still used, by the way, quite a bit for different purposes. And then we take all of these transistors and we push it down onto one of those little tiny squares and end up with billions of these transistors on one of those squares. All right, so this is an older processor, one I don't care about. It's got little gold pins. Those are actually gold. And it's got, the CPU right here in the middle and all the registers around it and so on. And a big heat sink or fan would sit on top of this. I actually like this one because a lot of times they'll put a plate over the top and you can't actually see this stuff. And so I like this one because you can see that and I can show it to people. But yeah, that's taking one of those and putting it in there, or a few different kinds of these, right, and putting it into this processor that's going to run a computer. There's billions of transistors. That's just amazing. So what does that really mean to us? Well, what it means to us is we have more computing power. Something like artificial intelligence or AI, self-driving cars, the expansive video games that we play, would not be possible without this kind of technology. And they continue to shrink things down further. IBM has a working quantum computer, meaning that that computer computes at a molecule level. You can't even see it, right? I couldn't show you the processor up on the screen behind me. It would be impossible. I'd have to show you with an electron microscope. And that creates a whole nother level of power that currently we don't use. So computing caused waves, and this shrinking it down caused waves. And the first wave was really having one computer for a lot of people. Computers were so huge, right, using those vacuum tubes. They were so massive that really you just could afford one. And you ran some cables so that people could look at TV sets basically and type on a keyboard that went back to the computer. Those are still actually around. They have their uses, but one computer for many users, and those were known as mainframes. Then we went to really what we're going to dig into deeper, which is the second wave of computing, which were PCs. Now, when I mean PCs, I don't mean just stuff running Windows. The term PC means personal computer. It means a computer that is used by a person. And so you had one computer per user. Now, the truth is, right, that you would have a PC in your house or a Mac in your house, and a lot of people would use it. We're not saying that no one else can use the computer. What we're saying is that one person uses the computer at a time. And then as we move forward, the third wave of computers, which we are currently affecting us, is having many computers per user. I have a watch. I like it. I have a phone. I have a tablet. I have a standard PC. I have a Mac. I have all these computers, and I'm the only one really using them. It's just me. Personal computers. And of course, this little picture is showing wearables. So the term ubiquitous, which is not a computer term, ubiquitous, means that something can be found everywhere. If you were to say a writing is ubiquitous, you would be saying everyone in the world has access to writing. Now, we know that's not totally true. We know there's people that don't have access to that. But for the most part, it is true, right? You can say a pencil and a piece of paper are ubiquitous. Books are ubiquitous, right? When computers become so small that they can be embedded, which means if you put into something, right, embed it into something, then they become ubiquitous, meaning they will be found everywhere. And that, of course, in some areas of our country are happening. In other areas, it's not happening so quickly. But you'll be able to find computers everywhere. What causes that? They're cheap. So if it's really cheap to put a computer chip into your clothes, then why not do it? If it only costs the company 1 cent and they can offer you something better because now it's tracking your heart rate or whatever it happens to be, why not do it, right? That's what we're looking at. is that they become so small, so inexpensive, that they just start putting them into anything to enhance their product, to make it something that you want to buy. And we tend to call those smart devices these days. So again, I talked about this before, but just to sum it up, quantum computing, right? That's being able to take the power that is in your phone and shrink it down so far that you can't even see it. And of course, that's a magnitude of power more, processing power more. And again, we have those. Those are available. They are here. And they'll become more and more prevalent as time goes on. So farmers, this is the honest truth. They looked at the automobile, and the thing when it started out, automobiles when they started out, were so unreliable that they would never consider using them. It's just like, why would I ever use an automobile? I got to fix it every 10 minutes. They would never replace the horse. To them, they're like, haha, that's never going to replace the horse. Well, we know historically that that's exactly what happened. They replaced the horse. So, same thing happened when PCs were produced. Tablet computing came out. And lots, that's a small example, lots of changes happened. But for some people, saying, for instance, I'm moving from a PC to a tablet, that's a huge thing for them to do. That hit the medical field massively, where in a lot of situations, they don't have these carts that they take around with this big computer on it where they put stuff in. They just have a tablet. And how that affected those people's jobs is if they were good with computers, it wasn't hard for them to go from that was in Windows and now this is on a mobile system. It was not a big deal to them. Others, it was hard. It was stressful for them to do. But think about this, way back in the day when horses were the big thing, how this still works today, right, is that all the shipping comes into different ports and then the trucks take that stuff inland, right? That's how it works. That's why you see so many truckers on the road. They're moving that product around, and the biggest place they start from is some port, Mississippi, California, wherever it happens to be. And so take that back to the olden days where they have these ships come into harbor and they take the freight off the ships and they would put it on a wagon and they would, take it inland to wherever it needs to go. Think about the person that looked at these cars and said to themselves, that's dumb. That's so stupid. Why would you ever replace your horse with such a thing? As opposed to the person that says, wow, that's really cool. If that technology, because that's what it was, ever gets to the point where it's actually really reliable, I'm going to go to that, right? Because I don't have to feed my horses anymore. I don't have to stop and take breaks for them. This would really change how I work. So the difference is this mindset of just being able to think outside the box, as they say, right? What would have happened? Well, the person that's kind of slow on the uptake there, that's not really thinking about those things, unfortunately for them, they're getting in too late. Maybe so late that they don't have a business anymore, because the person that's buying the trucks now can do more work. And all they have to do is buy another truck and start that up. And now they can take more freight in less time than you can with your horse and your wagon. And so if you're the person that's, on the bad side of that, your livelihood may disappear. Well, your livelihood depends on your ability to understand, apply, and adapt. And you will be in that process. It doesn't matter what your job is. You'll be in that process. Computers are the tools we use. So there's a big shift from using a standard desktop machine to a lot of it being on the phone. People that were really good with that have already moved that direction, and they're an asset to who they work for. People that aren't really good at it, they stick with the old way they did it because they're not really good with technology. They don't want to even try, and they get seen as the ones the company's pulling along instead of the ones that are going in the forefront. That kind of attitude of moving into the forefront is what makes you more money, what makes you more successful. And so as we go through this course, we're going to take a look at a lot of different technologies you need to just try to learn everything that you can and change that mindset if you're one of those people that's like, computers hate me, because they don't have a personality. And really start to understand, how do I use these? This is the place to do it, this class. That way, when you go out to work someday, you'll be ready to go. You'll be ready to move forward.